major development in operations management over the past 2 decades has been the use of quality audits to gauge the effectiveness of quality management systems in manufacturing and service organizations. Quality audit is a systematic and independent examination to determine whether quality activities and related results comply with planned arrangements and if these arrangements are implemented effectively and are suitable to achieve objectives. To share further insights on the topic, quality audit and accreditation, I extend a warm welcome to Dr. Lalu Joseph, Madam. This session will, however, be anchored by Dr. Khushali Ratra, Madam, the Director of Operations at the fully equipped, state-of-the-art, nearly 900-bedded Symbiosis University Hospital and Research Center, Pune. A little bit about Dr. Ratra. Dr. Ratra completed her Bachelor of Medicine and Bachelor of Surgery from Savitribai Phule, Pune University, and MPhil in Hospital and Healthcare Facilities Administration from BITS Pilani. She's trained in critical care medicine and has more than 2 decades of experience in setting up and managing a modern healthcare unit. She has special interest in process re-engineering and is actively involved in strategic management, physicians' engagement, and quality management. I welcome you, Madam, and I request you to kindly take the segment forward.
Thank you so much, Nabila. Thanks for the introduction, and welcome, Dr. Lalu. So Dr. Lalu Joseph is a mechanical engineer from the Madurai University. She holds a degree in MBA and then a PhD from the Weller Institute of Technology. She also holds a diploma in CQI from Canada Healthcare Association. She's been associated with CMC Vellore for the last 9 years, and now she is the quality manager and associate general superintendent at the CMC Vellore. Dr. Joseph is a principal assessor at NABH, and she's also a general secretary at CAHU. She's done 200 audits, and I'm sure her session is going to enlighten us on quality accreditation process. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Dr. Khushali, for the round of introduction and for Symbiosis for inviting me for this session. Thank you very much, participants. It's surprising to see 458 in the middle of lunchtime and still active and about. I happened to listen to the session on artificial intelligence, and great. Now I'm going to go a step backwards and talk about human intelligence and how we can use that to perfect our systems. And thanks for this wonderful opportunity provided. So all of us know it's nothing new. Healthcare organizations are the most complex organizations to manage. And we are seeing it day in and out as we manage this pandemic. Situations in Delhi going out of control. It is extremely complex in such situations to manage a healthcare organization. And running a hospital isn't brain surgery. It's harder than that. So with this background, we will get into how to perfect systems, in such complex situations. This is how a healthcare worker wants the hospital to be when he gets up in the morning and goes for work. Very organized traffic, everything as organized in lanes, and this is what you want. But in reality, it is like this. We call it in Tamil Nadu the T Nagar traffic, and I'm sure in Delhi, it is something like the Sarojini Nagar market traffic. You don't know where you're heading and where you are going. It's very difficult and chaotic. And that's typically how a day in a hospital is. Morning, you plan 100 things and come. And end of the day, when you sit down and think, what did I do? You probably did not complete even 10% of what you planned and came for. That's how it is. And we know healthcare is extremely hazardous. We get very scared probably getting into airlines. And we think it's very safe to get admitted in a hospital. But my friends, airlines is in the ultra safe category. Whereas when you come to healthcare, it is under the hazardous category. It's probably safer climbing on top of a cliff and jumping from there, which is bungee jumping, rather than getting yourself admitted in a hospital as a patient. Now leave that out. As a healthcare worker, again, it is hazardous working in a healthcare industry. So in such scenario, what are we talking about? All this quality, audits, patient safety, is it a reality at all? Now let's turn into some of real-time case scenarios from our country. A 33-year-old lady undergoing laparoscopic hysterectomy. She gets admitted and she goes into theater, and a tile from the false ceiling of the OT falls on her outstretched hands and she sustains fracture of the lower end of radius. Is it something which is very uncommon? Let me tell you, this has happened in multiple occasions. It has happened in our country. She gets admitted for something and then gets treated for something else. Two ladies, both 32 years old, both named Leelavati, were taken up for surgery in gynae OT. One was for a DNC of a malformed fetus and the other for a cervical ligation to prevent a mid-trimester abortion. Imagine a situation where these procedures got reversed. Has happened? Yes, certainly it has happened. So we all can agree that the practice of medicine probably was very simple, maybe relatively ineffective, but safer. My grandfather was a doctor. My mother didn't want to be a doctor. But when my grandfather was practicing in a village, the best of the produce from the market would go to my grandfather's house. My husband heads neurosurgery in CMC Vellore. And today my only prayer is, let nobody injure him. And my son is today trained as a doctor and he's practicing. Situations are worse. Why is it so? We know it is extremely complex. Medicine today is like this. Every single day, we are on the headlines. Shocking criminal negligence. Baby dies in incubator. Today's morning news, 13 people lost lives in a COVID ICU. Every single day, we hear all this. Faulty machine kills a lady, infant child to death. Imagine this situation. Two stuck to MRI machine for almost 4 hours. And even after all these incidents have happened, actually have we learned every single day we have problems in our hospitals. Avoidable confusion is everywhere. Look at these two. They both look alike. You can't even differentiate, but they are two totally different medicines. Imagine if this gets swapped and the wrong medication is given to the patient. That's the reason. Now, practice of medicine is complex. It is extremely effective today, but potentially dangerous. It's very, very dangerous at the moment. Now, who is responsible for this? For patient safety, for quality? Is it the doctors? Is it the nurses? Is it other staff, the administrators? Is it all of them? I don't know what you think, but my response is none of them. It's totally systems that needs to be set. And anytime there is a system failure, that is when you have your problems. System failure arises from the fact that we discuss and deliberate about patient safety and quality, but do nothing about taking initiatives for improving patient safety and delivery of quality care. All of us know that we are having problems with fire safety requirements in our ICUs. Every single day there are problems. And I have had hundreds of experiences, not just as an assessor, but as a quality manager of an organization with over 3,000 beds. And we are the largest hospital in the country to be accredited by NABH and re-accredited. It's not simple at all. When I had gone for an assessment to a northern state, where into an ICU, in a dialysis setup, I walked in, 14-bedded dialysis unit, and they were dialysis technicians, wonderful unit. And I asked the dialysis technician, imagine a fire here, what will you do? And they said, we will call number 1300. That's their code red number. And I said, okay, call this number 1300. The team came in immediately, swiftly, within 1 minute. Now, what does that team do? They come in with their extinguishers, they come in with their hydrants, hose reels. Now I ask these people, how are you going to evacuate your patients? Now you have 14 patients connected to the dialysis machine and you have to evacuate them. How are you going to do it? All of them were standing there, not knowing what to respond. And I asked them, have you had mock drill? They said, yes, all of us have attended mock drill. Where did you have your mock drill? The car park. What was the mock drill? Activate 1300, the team will come and then they will put off the fire. Now, does the fire get put off all the time? Not really. Now, in a situation like this, how will you evacuate? It's a very simple thing. Just to probably clamp and make sure that the patient is made to sit up. Patient doesn't have a syncope. Things are all right. He's ambulant. He can be moved out. But that presence of mind is extremely important. Now, if we don't train our ground level staff, that is typically where the system failure occurs. That is why our hospitals are becoming like furnaces today. And this is just an example where we don't take things very seriously. Human beings make mistakes because of the system tasks and processes that they work in are very poorly designed. This is said by none other than Professor Lucien Neal, testifying to the US President's Commission on Consumer Protection and Quality in Health. This is exactly the truth. Poorly defined and designed systems. Now, in our profession, there is no scope for error. For any error committed is all the difference between life and death, between relief and disability. There is no second chance. Then, what are we talking about? How are we going to correct and perfect our systems? The answer is it's not an easy thing, but at least we can start and try and get our culture of quality and patient safety. But how do we do that? Through setting up quality norms and accreditation. Now, people think this accreditation is like somebody comes, does an assessment of your hospital, grants a NABH or a JCI or any other international accreditation. But how easy is it to sustain? It is not a one-time exercise. Quality is never a one-time exercise. So it is a continual journey that we are talking about. So this accreditation is one of the tools to set that in place. Let me take you through this entire thing a little, in depth. What is this quality? Everybody talks about quality, quality, and quality. Now, when I ask the definition of quality, the answers I get is conformance to requirements. Is it all about quality? Certainly, it is conformance to requirements, following the right protocols, doing the right thing when no one is watching, doing the right thing every time. All these are beautiful definitions. But from whose perspective is this? Quality from the eyes of whom? Quality from whose point of view? Is it the provider of healthcare? Is it the recipient of healthcare? Or is it the organizer of the healthcare services? So for each of these, the definition of quality is totally different. Now, here, who is most important? It is typically the recipient of the healthcare services, which is your patient. That is one perspective. Provider wants to deliver safe care and he wants to ensure that protocols are followed. So that is another perspective. Recipient of healthcare services often don't look at the technical quality. It may be the best of the surgeon who operated on a patient, but he may not even talk to the patient. So the patient often thinks that that person is the worst person. He may have done the best surgery, the best sutures, but to the healthcare recipient, which is the patient, he's probably the worst doctor. Now, there could be another surgeon who's very poor with his hands, but he's excellent in communication. He talks to his patients. He would have done a mess up of that surgery, but he will talk and he will explain everything. He will have a great rapport with the patient, and the patient then thinks that he is the best provider. That is where the difference lies. Patients don't understand the technical quality. They understand the fringes around what is provided to them. That is why it's very important to look at quality from everybody's perspective, from the provider perspective, from the recipient perspective, and the organizers of the healthcare services, which is probably the insurance, the board, and the other stakeholders. Now, I'll put across a very simple definition of quality, which is from the perspective of the patients. Of course, the first part of it is straightforward. Quality is the degree of adherence to predetermined standards based on existing knowledge, principles, and practices. Now, the thing I like is quality is meeting the stated and implied needs of the patients, because we are for our patients and we need to ensure that we provide quality services to the patients. Now, what is the stated need and implied need? I'll give you a very small example of what a stated and implied need is. I'm extremely hungry in the morning after finishing my rounds, 10:30 in the morning. So I decide to have, in South India, in my state, dosa is very popular. So I decide to have a dosa in the hotel that is outside my hospital, Saravana Bhavan. So I go to this hotel, and straight when I go there, I ask, I don't even look at the menu card, but I say, sir, give me a dosa. That is my stated need. I want a dosa. That's what I have stated. Now, the server comes in. He is shabbily dressed. unclean. He brings a glass of water in his hands, which is not gloved, and the place is smelling. Temperature is about 27, 28 degree, humid, and he brings dosa with some sambar there, which is cold. But the dosa is excellent. Dosa is tasting very good. Am I going to be happy? Am I going to say this is the best dosa? No. Dosa, that's what I wanted. But the dosa is good. But I have not asked for anything else. But I still look for all of those, which is what is the implied need. I did not tell him, I want the temperature to be 22 degrees. I want the place to be clean. I want you to smile at me. I want 3-color chutney, green, red, and the white color chutney. I want the sambar to be piping hot. I want everything. I have not stated all that. But those are implied needs, which I have not stated, but yet expect from the service that is delivered to me. Now, this applies to our healthcare as well. Imagine a mother bringing a young child who cried throughout the night, holding his ears. Now, she comes first thing in the morning, 6:30 to the emergency services. And when she brings the child, she says, "Doctor, do something." Now, the doctor is doing something. He is arranging for the tests. He's arranging for some investigations, diagnostic tests, everything. But he hasn't talked to the mother. None of them have actually spoken to the mother. The nurses are walking around. The place is dirty. But the child, end of the day, probably after 3-4 hours, is better. He stopped crying. But still, is the mother going to be happy? She had no place to sit. She was anxious. Nobody to talk to her. Place was smelling, dirty. Nobody was even concerned about what was happening. Though the child became better, she's certainly not going to be happy. Now that, I feel, is what is quality from a patient's perspective. Of course, when you talk about the provider perspective, it's a lot more. Have you done the right investigation for the patient? Have you done the right thing? Have you managed with the right medication? Have you addressed that patient on time? Have you followed the clinical pathways in the management of the patient? All that is extremely important from the provider perspective. Though you stuck to all that, from the client perspective, you have been a failure. So this is why I say you have to look at it from the entire gamut when you look at quality. And it's not often very easy. That is why all these accreditation norms are extremely important. These accreditation standards are actually the implied needs of somebody or the other. When we say start with scope of services are defined, the scope of services are displayed. Who is it for? It is for the patient who is coming in. That patient has to see that these are the services offered by this hospital and he takes an informed decision. That is one of the implied needs of the patient. I want to know the services offered in this hospital. Why are we saying display the names of the doctors with their qualification? I want to again take an informed decision. These doctors, these are the people in the panel. I need to know who is the person I want to take my child to. So I need to take an informed decision here. Now we say, do hand hygiene, audits. Why? I want to ensure that my clients do not have any infections, acquired infections in the hospital, or our healthcare workers don't acquire anything from the patients. So you're insisting on that. So these are all implied needs. So every objective element in the accreditation standards actually revolve around someone or the other's implied needs. So when these implied needs are met, then we say there is quality. Now, what are these quality audits that we are talking about? Audits are classified into two, internal audits and external audits. Internal audits are the audits that are done by the staff in the hospital. We call them the first party audits. You're not inviting anybody to come and do the audit here. You do a self-assessment. You probably will ask the surgeons to go into the, some CSSD and do an audit, and the CSSD staff to go to the OPD and do an audit to see if there is conformance to the requirements set by the accreditation body. Or you could even define in your own hospital, this is how my terrace is going to be. The area is going to be marked. The water tanks are going to be marked. They are going to be cleaned. The area is going to be clean. There should be a panel board which has the electrical, the safety mat underneath. So I have certain parameters that I have defined, and that I'm going to give it to my team. And I have a trained team, and that team does the audit within my own facility. It is a self-assessment, which is what we call as the internal audits. Internal audits are of multiple types. For example, the chart audits that you do. in your hospital, the medical records that you audit, or the consent audits that you perform, all those are part of the first party audits. That is the staff of the hospital auditing their own systems and practices. The next thing is the external audits. What is this external audit? It is of two types, the second party audit and the third party audit. The second party audit is from people who are related to you in some way or the other. For example, you are taking the feedback from your patients. Now, in what way is that an audit? That the patient has taken the service from you. In some way or the other, the patient is related to you. You have given a service, and therefore that patient is giving a feedback about the service that you have provided. We call it the second party audit. Now, when it comes to the third party audit, the person who's doing the audit is in no way related to you, which is typically your accreditation and your assessments that happens, the third party assessments, your NABH assessment, your JCI assessment, even the fire department coming and auditing your system to see if your firefighting systems are in place is actually a third party audit. They are not related to you at all. They are coming and auditing with such parameters whether you are meeting the requirements. That is what we call as a third party audit. I hope you've understood the concept of internal and external audit, first party, second party, and third party audit. Now we are going to focus more on this third party audit because that is the one which is a value add. Whatever we do, when we are auditing our own systems, we don't see the fault the way an external person sees because we are born and brought up in that system. To us, that is normal. It is accepted practice. It is okay. Whereas when the third party comes and sees, they bring in a lot of good practices. They tell you the right thing to do, the mistakes that you are making, and how to correct your system. And that is why the third party audits or accreditation assessments are extremely important, and they are seen as a tool to improve your systems and processes. So now let's talk about this accreditation. What is this accreditation? Accreditation is an external review of quality. So it is a third party audit with 4 principal components. We must understand that. Number 1, it is based on written published standards. So it is not some open-ended thing. People come and say, you have not done this, you have not done that. No. It is based on written, published standards. Now, the current NABH standards we are following is the 5th edition. Every point is written down there. Nobody can raise a non-compliance beyond what is written or published in the standards. So it is typically based on written, published standards. Reviews are conducted by professional peer, our own peer in the industry, from other hospitals, from other setup. They are the ones who are reviewing you. They are not coming from a manufacturing sector or from a banking sector and coming and seeing what you are doing. The accreditation process is administered by an independent body, not at all related to you. It's an independent, not-for-profit or for-profit body, but it's totally independent of the healthcare delivery system. Then the aim of the accreditation is to encourage organizational development. That's why for every assessment we go, we say it's not a fault-finding exercise. It's a fact-finding exercise. And the only objective is to make sure that you keep on improving and improving, and therefore your organization develops. The culture of safety and quality comes into the organization. So these are the 4 major principles of external review or accreditation, not an inspection. Please understand. There's a lot of difference between an inspection and an accreditation. So the accreditation is often voluntary process. It is not a mandatory process. Now, NABH or JCA or ACHS or any standards in this country is not mandatory. It is a voluntary process. Now, there are many accreditation standards in the globe. In our country, we have our published standards, which is the NABH. In the US, there is this JCO. And the US offers some other program called the Joint Commission International for the international audience or the international healthcare organizations. Any organization outside US, they use the JCI standards. ACHS is the Australian standards. Taiwan has its own standards. Malaysia has its own standards. There are other countries that do not have standards, but accept our standards. For example, in Philippines, I have gone for an assessment of NABH in Philippines. So NABH is accepted internationally, but not many countries have adopted to it. So therefore, this is how it is set up. Now there is another body called the International Society for Quality. They are the ones who actually assess the accreditation bodies. So the NABH standards are accredited by ISQA, which means it is international. Any other country can adopt the NABH standards. Now coming to the objectives of accreditation, it's very straightforward. Assess the quality and safety of care. Assess the hospital's ability to ensure continuous improvement. It's not a one-time exercise. You have to continuously demonstrate whether you have the capability and you can demonstrate that there is continuous improvement. Formulate explicit recommendations for the hospital. These are the things that you need to focus on. You need to focus on your documentation. You need to focus on your CSSD management. You need to focus on your infection control practices. Involve professionals at all stages of the quality initiative, starting from the doorman to the chairman. Everybody in this process. I think accreditation is the only exercise where the entire hospital is involved. When MCA comes for inspection or Indian Nursing Council comes, it's only those groups that are involved. Whereas when probably NABH comes for assessment, it's the entire hospital, starting from the doorman, who's the security at the door, to your chairman. Provide external recognition of quality of care to the hospital. So they have come, assessed, they have seen all systems in place, 70% complaints, 80% complaints, you are fit to be accredited. So it's an external recognition of the quality, seen, audited carefully by your external peer. How is it important for the hospital? It improves the public confidence. It also improves the confidence of the staff themselves. You will notice it's a culture change that we experience in our hospitals after accreditation. Now, I clearly know 9 years of struggle. And today, it's all become part and parcel of the system. At one point, when we said medication orders will have to be written by the doctors and the nurses will only administer and put the administration record, I almost had a garo in my office. But today, none of the new doctors actually know that there was a system where nurses were transcribing, doctors were writing in one sheet, another sheet, third sheet, fourth sheet. And today it's become part and parcel of the system. It really improves the public confidence and also the confidence of your own general healthcare fraternity. And when COVID came in, we were probably better prepared. I can't say it in the second wave today, but of course we did manage the first wave very well because we had systems established well. What are the focus? It's on patient safety and patient safety. Also on staff and employee safety, environment and community safety. So it's all about the safety aspects of all the stakeholders who come into the hospital. We talk about information, education, and communication to those who are taking the service from us. Measurement of performance. Quality is about measuring the performance. What gets measured gets managed. If something is not measured, it can never be managed. Therefore, you're going to be measuring your infection control, infection rates, your surgical site infections, your 40, VAP, ventilator-associated pneumonia, starting from the time of the patient coming in to the initial assessment, to the time of discharge, whether the patients actually received the discharge summary. So everything is measured. Earlier, the problem was that in our system, we didn't have a proper measurement. Today, we have a dashboard. Every hospital is almost measuring about 200 individual parameters, organized around very important functions. So I would say, in short, that the accreditation standards are a doctor's toolkit or a nurse's toolkit for quality care and patient safety. Simple measures can save lots of lives. ID bands, you double check on the ID of the patient. We insist on accreditation, on patient identification. It can eliminate so many patient identification errors by a very simple thing of having an ID band and a unique ID for the patient. WHO surgical safety checklist, the sign in, time out, and sign out can help a large way in identifying the right patient. Imagine a wrong patient taken in for surgery. You will have Arnab Goswami shouting the next day on top of his voice, India wants to know. Why should you have that embarrassing situation? In 1996, the first episode that most of us had, you probably were children at that time, was the first time when Sridevi's mother was operated for her brain surgery in one of the leading centers called Sloan Kettering in Manhattan on the wrong side of the brain. And everybody said, how is it possible? Is it possible? Yes, it is. If you don't identify the right patient, the right procedure, the right side, the right site, you will end up in catastrophe. So a simple tool like this, a surgical safety checklist, balanced by the surgeons, the anesthetist, and the scrub nurse, identified and done properly, can actually eliminate a lot of problems. Safer medication, look-alike, sound-alike medicines. This is typically a medication tray in a hospital. Can you imagine a situation and the emergency occurs? It's certainly the wrong drug that will go into the patient. Look at this, pink color with multiple colored drugs, and you don't even know what those drugs are. You will end up giving the wrong drug. Look at this. Is it 50 mg, 250 mg, 25 mg? These are all common practices which could result in major errors for our patients. Look at this. This actually has about 7 different drugs. That's the problem. Look at this. The order is for injection and the pharmacy has actually given a tablet. These are things that you can certainly avoid by having good systems. And that's why we insist on accreditation. And I think once you start the journey, it's a difficult journey, but it will certainly set systems in place. To talk a little bit about this National Accreditation Board, it's a constituent body of the Quality Council of India. NABH just does not operate only for healthcare. It has for dental setup, for Ayurvedic, Ayush setup, and there are a lot of excellence standards like nursing excellence. Those are all certification programs. But there are 2 major areas. One is full accreditation and the other one is entry-level certification. Entry-level certification was created just as a starting point for hospitals that are embarking the journey of quality. There's no compromise on patient safety in that standards also. It's just a concise version of the bigger full accreditation. Full accreditation, we follow the 5th edition currently. Whereas the entry-level certification, there's only one standard. And that has about 169 objective elements. The full standards today has about 561 objective elements. Hospitals are divided into 2 categories, small healthcare organization and healthcare organization. Over 50 beds, you fall under the category of HCO, which is healthcare organization. Less than 50 beds, you fall under the category of a small healthcare organization. So each of these, whether it is nursing excellence or it is full accreditation or entry-level certification or the emergency standards, all of them focus on 10 areas. The first chapter, we call it, is the AAC, Access, Assessment and Continuity of Care. This is from the time the patient comes in, the access to the service, the initial assessment, how is the UHID generated, how is the patient registered, how is he admitted, how is he discharged, how is the initial assessment performed, how are the regular reassessment performed, how are they documented, who is documented them, who documenting them, how are the lab services doing their services, are there SOPs, what is the scope of the lab service, is there IQAS, internal quality assurance, do they have external quality assurance, how are the other diagnostic services like imaging, CT, MR, ultrasound performing, is there radiation safety in place, is there an identified discharge process, and is there a discharge summary provided to all patients. That is the crux of AAC, access of patient, assessment and continuing care within the hospital setting. The second chapter talks about the care of patients, the actual clinical care delivered to the patient. Is it as per accepted norms, accepted clinical practice? Are they following clinical guidelines? How is your emergency service doing? How are they using the blood and blood products? How are you managing your ICUs and HDU? Do you have an admission discharge criteria? How about your infection control practices? How are you managing your obstetric, pediatric, anesthesia and theatre patients, surgical patients? How are you taking consents? How are you actually delivering the care and documenting what is required? The third chapter talks about the management of medication. How are you procuring? How are you storing? How are you prescribing? How are you dispensing? Including all your drugs, your implants, and also your consumables. And typically, how is the documentation? How is the prescription given? How is it administered? How is the documentation of that? Are you monitoring adverse drug reactions? Are there adverse events? How are you using your radioactive agents? The fourth one talks about patient rights and education. all about patient education, consenting process. How are you talking to them? Are you meeting their religious needs? Are you exhibiting empathy and compassion to the care? Are you having a standardized tariff list? Are you actually telling your patients about their rights and responsibilities? That's what gets covered in chapter 4. Chapter 5 is a very important chapter, which is on hospital infection control. Whether you have a team to monitor your infection in the hospital, is there a manual? Do you have surveillance activity? What are the various steps that you're taking towards preventing hospital-acquired infections? How are you managing outbreaks, your antibiotic policy, your antimicrobial stewardship? How are you managing your CSSD, your laundry, your biomedical waste, all that as per norms, as per statutory and regulatory compliances. This is again another pillar of the entire accreditation standards, which is patient safety and quality improvement. It used to be called as CQI. Now it is rephrased as PSQ. Whether you have a structured quality improvement and patient safety program, are you monitoring indicators? How are you tracking them? How are you presenting them? How are you doing your clinical audits? How are you analyzing your incidents? Is there a complaint and feedback management system? It's all about measurement. Do you have teams doing that in a right manner? And how are you using this data to bring about quality improvement? And the 7th chapter is about the responsibility of management. This is about the top leadership. Is the management doing the right thing? Are they managing the healthcare organization in an ethical manner? Are they having a standardized tariff? Do they have multidisciplinary committees and are they overseeing them? Are they actually complying to statutory and regulatory requirements? Do they have a mission, vision, organogram, values, service standards at all? Are they monitoring all of those? Is the 7th chapter. The 8th chapter is again a very important one on facility management. This is to ensure the safety of patients, staff, visitors, everybody. The appropriate infrastructure, licensed infrastructure, patient safety systems in place like grab bars, side rails, nurse call system. Are they being monitored? Are they being preventive, operational and breakdown maintenance is being done? Are you supplying safe water, electricity, medical gas, vacuum to the patients that you care? Is there a plan for fire and other emergencies that could take place in a hospital? Are you doing mock drills? All those are covered under this. The 9th one is about human resource management. How are you staffing? How are you doing your manpower planning? Is it equity driven? Is it based on some calculation that you are actually planning your resources? How are you recruiting them? How are you training them? Do you have a system for disciplinary and grievance handling? How are you addressing the health needs of your patient staff? How are you managing the personal records? How are you checking their credibility and their credentialing? How are you privileging them for the various procedures that they can perform independently under supervision or not perform at all? And the last chapter is about information management system. That's completely about your medical records. It could be your written medical records or your soft, your information technology. How is the access given? Can anybody access anybody's case sheet? How are you managing confidentiality, integrity, security? What is the backup? What is the disaster management for your IT system? Are you auditing the documentation in your case sheets? All these get covered under the information management system. So that's about it. It's entirely the hospital that gets covered under the accreditation standards. That's why I always say it is from the doorman to the chairman. Anybody and everybody, they have a role in the healthcare organization. We all know that we function in separate silos, little kingdoms. Doctors don't talk to the nurses, nurses don't talk to the technologists, technologists don't talk to the housekeeping. So it's all different little kingdoms and silos. This is all towards bringing everybody together towards a teamwork with people assigned responsibility for each of the tasks. Each SOP, this is the responsibility of the doctor. This is the responsibility of the nurse. This is the responsibility of the housekeeping. So everybody knows that they have to function as a team. And when the teamwork comes together, that is when you can have a culture of quality and safety in your organization. So I totally object to the idea of having a quality manager responsible for the quality management of an organization. It is everybody's business. It is only that individual who's probably coordinating. I have seen organizations which actually gives performance appraisal based on the number of NCs. If there are less NCs, the quality manager gets a better performance appraisal. Less NC, the more NC and the poor girl is thrown out. And that quality manager is almost seen like a Superman and Spider-Man. That person has to be smiling all the time, has to be good in training, has to work around everybody, has to work with everybody, has to be a great trainer, has to do this, has to do that. It's like a Superman and a Spider-Man. But let me tell you, today when I look back 10 years down the line. It's an amazing journey through the system, managing this healthcare quality and patient safety, working with people, working around people, making them understand that it's all about teamwork. And all of us know the meaning of team, which is together everyone achieves more. And I typically like this. We talk too much about system. System awareness and system design are important for health professionals, but they are not just enough. They're only enabling mechanisms. It is finally the ethical dimension of individuals that's essential to a system's success. Ultimately, the secret of quality is love. You have to love your patient, you have to love your profession, you have to love your God. If you have love, you can then work backwards to monitor and improve your system. So you have the best of system, and you don't have people who love the job, who love the profession, who love your hospital, who love the setup, then you can do nothing about it. So the most important thing is love for the patient, love for the profession, love for God, love what you do, and then you work backwards and improve your system. Thank you so much, SimHealth 2021, for giving me this wonderful opportunity, and I'm happy to take on questions.
Thank you, Dr. Lalu. I don't think anybody would have done more justice to this topic in 30 minutes than you have done. I think we have time for only one quick question, and that question will be based on the last two incidences which just happened on the oxygen leak and the fire which happened coincidentally in Maharashtra. Like, I'm sure they would have done audits and mocks. How would the real-time doing CAPA and RCA would have helped the entire system in the healthcare, which you said it comes up into the media because we falter somewhere on doing our RCA and CAPA? I just want you to throw some light on it.
Yeah. So I don't think we have taken ourselves very seriously. That's what I always say. In that incident that I quoted with the dialysis setup, we still don't have protocols in our hospital when something like this happens because it's inevitable. We have too much of equipment load. We have our, so many machines. The equipment load is so high. You have your air conditioners, you have everything. So fire, spark is bound to happen. But if at all it happened, of course, yes, you have to have your good preventive maintenance so that it doesn't happen. But if at all it happened, do you have a system of proper evacuation? Do your nurses and doctors know how to evacuate a patient? Because this is a ventilated patient and it's not easy to just unplug like that and move the patient. Now, who's responsible to bag and move the patient? Who's responsible to ensure that the medications are taken along? You may have some life-saving drug that is going along with the patient. So somebody has to really assist. So you have to prepare your intensive care team to take care of any emergency, which is the route to take. Where is the alternate site? Where can you take? Now, COVID is happening. COVID, you have to have your own COVID fire management protocol. I have prepared protocol for every ward, which is the alternate care site. Imagine ICU patients. Where will you take them? You have to at least take them into some theater or somewhere where you can plug to another oxygen inlet and try and connect them and continue the care. Because end of the day, people on the ground need to know. It is not the external fire service. They can do nothing. They will come and douse the fire. By then you would have lost lives. So that is what I am going on insisting. As a surgeon, does he know midpoint case, abdomen wide open? Does he know how to evacuate the patient? What is the role of the anesthetist? Are you going to sit and suture that? No. Just put a sterile towel on top, move the patient out. Anesthetist has to ambu and bag. Others, their role. So do our surgeons and anesthetists actually know what to do? Our scrub nurses and circulating nurses, do they know what to do in such emergencies? A brachytherapy patient connected to a machine. Fire, what do you do? Earthquake, what do you do? So that is what is most important. We need to take our mock drill seriously, not just on the car park doing some fancy thing and knowing how to operate an
Do a real-time mock drill rather than just doing a mock drill. I think that's...
Yes, protocols. People should know their roles. That's what I'm saying. Each individual, they're only in one place. They need to know their role in case something happens. What is their role? What is the role as a team? When they know that, you can do tabletop exercises. You don't have to do a real-time one also. You can do virtual exercises. We are now doing virtual exercises. Ask them like a Viva, what will you do? What are you going to do? This is the route. How are you going to take it? It's blocked. What are you going to do? So it's like a Viva. It's like a tabletop exercise. Once you do that with the right intent and spirit, I think we'll be fine.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, I agree with your point. Quality is not a destination, it's a journey, it's a continuous process which keeps on improving. Accreditation is just a certificate or whatever, but it has to be done in letter and spirit, which we all fail to do when it comes to it. Thank you very much. I think Nabila is here to take up the next session. And thanks. It was pleasure having you over here and listening to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thanks for the wonderful opportunity.
Thank you.
Stay safe.
Yeah, you too.
Thank you so much, Dr. Joseph, for highlighting the dangers of practicing medicine, but also reassuring us that we may, through setting up quality norms and accreditations, avoid getting into a down spiral. And also for the lovely dosa story. That was really heart touching. Thank you so much. And also thank you, Dr. Atra, for being such an indefatigable host for this session. We really enjoyed it.